Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And thank you all for being here. After how many sessions did you attend? A lot, right? So you're still here. You still look awake, which is amazing to me. And so maybe, I don't know what they put in the coffee here, but it's definitely working. So let's talk about the title here. Some of you might remember me from other conferences I spoke to. And you know that usually I like to talk about people stuff, okay? Like leadership, teamwork, responsibility, personal responsibility, psychological safety. But this time I'd like to share a more personal story. It's a journey that I'm taking with a client of mine. And so I'd like to share part of this journey with you because I found it interesting. It helped me review my perspective on Agile from a different angle. So maybe it can be helpful to you too. That's what I'd like to share. So the title, as you can see, mentions lean manufacturing. I'm not sure that many of you in this room work in manufacturing. Is anybody working in manufacturing? One person back there, another one, and we have three, four! We have 4 people working in manufacturing. And how many people are working in IT, software, or well, okay, everybody else. Okay. I mean, that's not unexpected, right? Because that's where Agile came from. Agile was born in the cradle of software development for a very simple reason once you look at it, which I'm going to share later. So lean manufacturing, of course, is a little bit different. Lean manufacturing is about making something physical, like this clicker, you know. So if you want to sell this clicker, probably you don't want to sell just one because that would be cost inefficient. You want to sell 100,000, which means that you need to optimize your production. And once you optimize something, it becomes harder to change because you invested so much in optimizing your process, so it becomes expensive to change. But the problem is that companies these days are starting to realize that even manufacturing companies, they need to be agile, they need to be more adaptive, reactive, resilient, because the world now has a different speed than 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So this idea of bringing agility into lean manufacturing is a necessity, something that many companies need to do. And in fact, I've been working with a client in the last 3 years. One of my clients is an oil and gas company. So these companies, they make components and systems for extracting and bringing gas into your houses or into industries or whatever. So it's a very physical business. The things they make, they have an important, some of these valves, they weigh 100 kilos. Okay? And then you need to ship this thing somewhere by sea or by air. And I don't know if you're aware of the costs of sending 2 tons of steel by air. So it's very, very interesting business, challenging as well. So in this talk, what I'd like to do is I'd like to touch on 3 different themes. I'd like to talk about lean manufacturing. I'm going to give you a brief introduction or whatever, however, sharing what I've seen. I'm going to talk about Agile, and I'm going to talk about business agility as well. Because as I was saying, many companies these days need to manifest business agility even though they are not in software. Okay? So I'm going to touch on these 3 different themes. I'm not going to tell you which is which. You'll have to figure it out. Okay? But you are smart guys. So a very quick Gemba tour. Gemba tour is a term that we use from Toyota Production System. A Gemba tour is when you are a manager and you go where things happen. Sometimes people confuse Gemba with the production floor, but it actually means where the work is done. Okay, wherever the work is done is the Gemba. And walking into the Gemba is a very important experience from a management position because you can see and touch with firsthand what is really going on. Okay? So that's what a Gemba tour is. Now, let's take this product here up. Oops, sorry. This one. Upper right corner. You have gas in your houses. Okay, if you have gas, it's because gas is managed in a certain way that it comes into our houses at a certain pressure. And if the pressure is not right, you might not get gas or have a flame this tall, okay, which is inconvenient. Okay. So to regulate the pressure properly, we use gas regulators, which is this little device here. This is just the body of a gas regulator. But as you can imagine, it's a very kind of a tiny, and it's also a mechanical device. This one, there is no electronics involved, okay? It's just a mechanical device. However, it needs to be very reliable. You don't want to have gas problems in your house, okay? It must be very reliable. It must be cost efficient, okay? And we want to produce 10,000 or 100,000 of this one, okay? And it's a bit complicated to assemble. What you see here is a fishbone that represents how all the different tiny components must be assembled in a certain way. So the assembly process is kind of critical. Some of these components are tiny spheres, microspheres that must be in the perfect position. So it's very complicated to assemble. And to optimize the production, of course, we use production lines. So each one of these stations here, this one, this one, this one, this one, these are different phases in the assembly process. So somebody took care of designing an assembly process very carefully and optimizing this assembly process phase by phase. Okay. And each phase, of course, is manned. There is a person doing the work. You don't see people there, okay? But there are people doing the work. And that's how we can optimize. As I was mentioning, this component must also be very reliable, so we need quality assurance. And quality assurance can be partially automated. So as you can see here, this is a camera that recognizes how much grease was put into a specific part of this regulator. So it automatically detects if there is too much, exactly the right amount, or not as much grease as we want to. Okay? So it is automatic quality assurance. Another thing that we have, of course, if we're dealing with physical products, is we need a supply chain. Okay? We need stuff coming in, and we need to ship stuff when it's done. Okay? So we have storage and supply and so on and so on and so on. We use metrics to monitor the quality, to monitor the speed, to monitor the defects, and so on and so on and so on. And in general, we can say that the Toyota production system, TPS, was designed as a way to optimize the production. At the same time, TPS had a very holistic and human-centric view of the work. If you think that TPS and lean are just mechanical things, you're probably not interpreting lean correctly. The individual, the customer, for instance, we talk about the voice of the customer, okay, in lean. So we listen to people. We listen to what they need, what they ask from us. And we take care of the workers and so on and so on and so on. Now, this was just a brief introduction. Now, let's talk about Agile. I don't need to spend too many words about Agile here. The only thing I'd like to mention is just remember, at the beginning I was saying, Agile was born in the cradle of software development for a simple reason. And the reason is that software development was the first industry in the history of mankind that is based entirely on cognitive work. There was no other industry, I'm talking about industries, right? Investments, facilities, and so on. There was never an industry in the history of mankind that was based entirely on creating and selling immaterial products. Okay? Our software has no weight, has no mass. Okay? You cannot touch it, smell it. Okay? It's a completely immaterial product. What we see are people thinking, people solving problems, people creating solutions, people typing code. We see workers. We see cognitive workers. We don't see the work. Right? It's not an assembly line. An assembly line, if something is not assembled correctly, you see it immediately. With code, we need to write it, compile it, deliver it, install it, run it, test it, and eventually we realize that something here was wrong. Because we don't see what happens until we run it. right? Okay. Now, it's no surprise that at the beginning, like 30, 40 years ago, because this was the first industry that was based entirely on cognitive work, we tried to replicate the industrial processes in cognitive work. But since we didn't have anything physical that we could move along the production line, we started moving documents. So you have the analyst, and the analyst writes paper, and then you give this to the architect, and the architect writes paper, and then the architect gives this to the technical designer or whatever, and eventually you give this to the developers, okay? And the distance between what we asked for and what we are doing was huge, with no way of testing its validity in between. They were just assumptions. So this is what we call paper processes. And we needed a way to optimize, to reduce the feedback loop. And one of the reasons why Agile was developed was because we needed to introduce the same kind of quality and efficiency that we had in production. At the same time, we need to translate that into the creation of non-material products. Okay? Because non-material products have certain characteristics. You can change them much easier than a physical product. If I decide that I want to change this guy, I don't like the shape of this guy. Okay? Technically, I could retire all of them, change the case, and send it back to you. Technically, I could do that, but the cost implications are absurd, right? You would never do that. You throw it away and buy a new one, right? But how many updates to your apps do you get every day? How many apps on your phones are updated every week? We have products that are constantly improved because the product is digitally transmitted to you every day. It's a completely different business. At the same time, we need the same quality, we need the same human centricity that we have in TPS. Okay? And if I can go back to lean for a second, even in lean manufacturing, we are trying to reintroduce agility. Now, agility in lean manufacturing is not in the product. As I was saying before, the product, once it's done, once it's made, once it's shipped, is very hard to change. What you can change is the process with which you make a variation to the product. So your process is agile. You can change the production line because you want a different case for this guy. Okay? So the process is agile, and it's optimized. But once you have delivered your goods, well, they're delivered. So there's nothing else you can do. But anyway, the process can be agile. And there are ways of creating an assembly line taking into account many of the principles that we use in software development. And I'll show you some of them later, including, for instance, the concept of interface. The interface between one workstation and the other workstation may remain the same, even though I change the implementation of the workstation. I can change the implementation and keep the interface. Sounds familiar? Okay? Keep the interface, change the implementation. That's a way of achieving agility. That's another way of achieving agility in lean, is by prototyping, fast prototyping. Now, when these guys, they need to create one of these workstations, they start with cardboard. Okay? Cardboard, and they write a few things, they imagine what it could be, and then the next phase is, okay, let's try this with wood. And then if we like the wood, and by the way, the operators, the people that will use this product, this user workstation, they get involved. Okay, you test this with the actual users in the prototype phase. Okay, so you go with wood, and then you go with metal, and then modular aluminum, which is a final prototype. And you see the numbers up there, by 10, by 50, by 250. This is not the scale, this is not the size. It's the amount of information. The idea is that if we have information 10 from this model, we want to have information 50 from this model, and we want to have information 250 from this model. So we increase the amount of information in the model until we get something that we like. Okay? It's a very interesting way of prototyping. And quality assurance should sound familiar as well. I told you what this is. This is where a regulator is put into test once it's assembled. Okay? So it's the final test for the regulator. But in software, I would call that one unit test, and I would call this one integration test. Yeah? Integration test is once you put everything together, you run it and see what happens. That's integration test. And unit test is when you test the components in isolation, right? And this way of testing, of course, it's very important because it gives us feedback. And feedback is what makes us agile. Okay? So the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I want to start drawing your attention to this idea that there are certain things that are in common between lean manufacturing and agile. Other things are not in common, okay? But some things are. And the reason why I wanted to draw your attention to this is because, as I was saying at the beginning, this gave me a different perspective of what agile really is, or agile could be. Anyway, one thing that I mentioned already is that both agile and lean are in fact human-centric. Okay? We proud ourselves in the agile community that we take a lot of care of people, and we do. Okay? As you have seen from the presentations from these 2 days, we definitely do. But we're not the only ones, and it's a different kind of taking care. Okay? And I'll tell you more about this, but even in good lean manufacturing, you take care of the workers in certain ways that I'll explain later. And also, as I mentioned, there's the idea that both agile and lean manufacturing have their customer as their North Star, their reference point. Okay? The voice of the customer, value delivered, okay, whatever you want to call it, but that's where you want to go. Okay? So I've been talking about a few things. I've been talking about value production, so the value stream. I've been talking about quality assurance, and I have not been talking yet about safety. Now, from my understanding, in lean manufacturing, if it's done right, you invest a lot on safety. I'm going to drink. And when I talk about safety, I mean not safety of the users. As I was saying, you don't want your gas regulator to explode in your house. That would be unpleasant. Okay? So not only safety for the users, okay, but also safety for the workers. I'm not talking about accidents, about people getting injured. I'm not talking only about that. Even overwork is not taking care of people. Because when a worker starts to overwork, they are more prone to make mistakes and to damage either the product or themselves. Okay? So that's another kind of safety. Okay? And then you want to prevent the possibility of making mistakes or injuring ourselves. So we take a very good care of that in lean. I'm not sure we take as much care of safety for cognitive workers. I'll get back to that later. And I'm not talking about psychological safety. I'm talking about other forms of safety. Okay? So let's talk about this. Safety. Well, I told you it's part of the break. Let's go to the point. How many times do you spend in online meetings these days? Is it? I don't want to know. Yeah. Can I say 8 hours a day you're sitting in front of a webcam? Is it healthy? No. It's not healthy for your body, it's not healthy for your mind, it's not healthy for your family, it's not healthy for a number of reasons. Okay? Now, nobody's bad, nobody's doing this to you intentionally. Okay? There is no bad guy here. But it's something we must become aware of. Okay? The thing is, it's very easy to see when somebody gets physically injured. It's not as easy to see if somebody gets emotionally, intellectually, or simply injured in their health because they spend too much time talking to other people through a webcam. Okay, so that's good. And that's also an interesting point because I was reading an article. I don't remember. It was the COO of a large company, very famous. I don't remember the company right at the moment. Anyway, he made the point that if you are having too many meetings in your organization, which, by the way, is a huge theme, just go on Google and search too many meetings, and you find articles on HBR, on Business Hardware Review, everywhere. Everybody's talking about why too many meetings are a problem. Okay? But this guy was saying something very simple. If you have too many meetings in your organization, that's a symptom of a process which is not properly handled. You are not taking care of the processes in your organization properly. And the reason why we don't take care of these processes properly is because they are cognitive processes. It's because we don't see the work. Okay? If you have a physical process, it's easier to manage. An intellectual cognitive process you don't see, and therefore it is harder to manage. And we mess up. Okay, we mess up. Of course, we have solutions. We, in the Agile world, we have solutions. We have Kanban, which is a wonderful way for visualizing workflow. Okay, but we don't use it properly, or we don't use it at all. Okay, or we don't use it in the right context. How many of you use Kanban in your sales department? Okay, just a few. Okay, or in HR. Yeah, okay, so you see, it's happening. Some of you are using visual management, process management tools for cognitive work. We need more of that. Because if you manage the work, you don't need to manage the people. If you manage the work properly, you don't need to manage the people. People are smart enough to do the right thing given the right conditions. Usually. Most of the time. Most of the time. Okay? So that's one thing. We need to take more care about safety. A couple of other, simply very quickly, quick notes. Measurements, of course, if you come from lean manufacturing, you measure everything, okay? Because you need to optimize. But when we translate the idea of measuring to cognitive workers, now the question is, are you measuring the right thing? Because the thing is, as humans, we tend to act depending on what we feel measured on. Okay? If I feel that I am measured on how many meetings I attend online, then I'm going to be there all the time. I mean, am I going to be productive? Probably no, but I'm there all the time. Okay? So when you measure cognitive work, I don't think that the term KPI is a good idea, because KPI stands for Key Performance Indicators. Okay? If you want to measure performance, that's fine. If you want to measure value generated, I'm not sure that that's a performance metric. Okay? Because value is a very abstract concept. You can measure revenue. Revenue is a number. Okay? But other things are harder to measure. I'm going to skip because I don't want that gentleman over there to be late. So the other thing that happens when we translate the manufacturing mentality to software development is that we tend to focus on stuff done rather than value produced. Output, things that we shipped, even though they are useless, okay, rather than value generated. And somebody yesterday was talking about this idea that if you deprive people from autonomy and mastery, all they have left, autonomy and purpose, all they have left is mastery. All we can do at this point is to show off how good we are technically, even though this is not aligned to a specific purpose. That was a very good point. So, a few things I want you to remember before I go. So what I'm trying to explain is that we started with Toyota Production System and Lean, then Agile in software came along, and now we start to see Agile used in other cognitive domains, like finance. Okay, finance is a cognitive domain. We don't produce anything physical in finance. Okay, we produce revenue or whatever. HR, organizational management, marketing, and so on. Research and development, which could be in between. But now what we're starting to see is that we're starting to use Agile for hardware development as well. That's in theory. In reality, I don't see this happening much. Okay. In reality, when I go to client, as I asked you before, how many of you are using Kanban not in software development? It was probably 5% or 3% of the people in this room. Okay? And you are in IT. Remember, I asked you how many people are working in manufacturing. It was 4 people. It means that the other 200 here are working in IT. And I asked you, are you using Kanban to visualize processes that are not related to software? And a few people raised their hands. So, sorry, okay, bad news. We can do better about this, okay? We can definitely do better in Lean and Agile at the organizational level. So a few things that I like to leave you with. Number 1, Agile is not just processes, it's not just tools, it's not just people. There are technicalities of Agile that are relevant in whatever domain you work on. If you work in marketing and you don't understand the mechanics of digital marketing and you pretend or you expect to be Agile, you are going nowhere. Even if you're doing sprints or whatever retrospective with your marketing team, if you don't understand the mechanics of digital marketing, you are lost. And that's the same for software development, and that's the same for engineering, for mechanical engineering. We need to remember that technical agility is as important as the agile processes that we use, and as the agile mentality that we apply. Okay? So we must not neglect that. The other thing is, show me the work. That's my way of explaining this. If you work in an organization, a cognitive-based organization like that, as I was saying, please use whatever kind of visual management tool you want. If you don't want Kanban, use whatever you like, but please make the work visible and transparent to everyone so that we can manage properly the work. Okay? Please do that. Okay? I'm not going to spend much time on leadership because there have been a number of excellent points on leadership in this conference, but my perception is that one change that we need to remember is that the leadership in an agile context is an act, and it's an act of creating the right environment for things to happen. Okay? You cannot control, you can create the conditions, and the role in this case is to create, and it could be the condition with the 2 other people in your team. I don't care, but you create the right condition for the right things to happen in terms of agility. But anyway, I don't want to spend too much time because there have been a lot of very good points about leadership. The other thing I'd like to mention is there is this company. Oh, this is Q-Aspire. No, sorry. And my mistake. There is a tendency in the Agile community to attach labels of right and wrong. Okay. This is wrong. From privacy, from planning, from controlling, to transparency, to experimentation, to empowering. There is this idea that we must go in that direction, everyone, okay, and all the organization, and that in general this is bad, and in general this is good, okay. I don't think that's the case. Most of the time you need all of this stuff, just in different percentages, okay. Are you sure you want to live in a world with no privacy at all in your organization? There are some things that legally are protected by privacy, okay? So, planning, yeah, sure, we can do experimentation, but tell your marketing people that you are going to experiment for the next couple of years and maybe clients will show up, okay? So we don't publish anything, we don't go to conferences, we don't do advertising, we just experiment and see what happens. We need both, that's what I'm trying to say. You need a vision and you need to experiment on that vision, right? So try to avoid that if you can. And in general, I know I'm late, Gil, but I'm finished. In general, you can read the Agile Manifesto, the first principle of the Agile Manifesto, more or less like this. We like to say individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That's true. And for me, individuals and interaction is explore, adapt, and be effective. Adapt is on the people side because people are the most agile thing that you have in your organization. Okay? Your processes and your tools are not agile. You are agile. You can adapt, okay? Faster than anything else, okay? With resistance, that's fine, that's natural, but we are adaptive, okay? So people are adaptive, and everything here, we need to optimize and be efficient, and we need both. You just need to find the right balance that works for you, okay? And I'm done. So if I can say, okay, what can we learn in Agile from Lean, is make people's safety a priority, make them visible to everyone, and strive for quality at all levels, okay? These are the things that I'd like to see more in the Agile community. And I'm done this time. I mean, the conference is almost over, so I'll be around for like next round, 1 more hour. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, please feel free, and we can continue the discussion on LinkedIn. Okay, and thank you very much.